We return, a little bit out of order here if you're watching the full playlist. I covered Gendaran Fields in the last episode, which is kind of a T3 map. But there's still one of the kind of T2 maps, as in a map you enter as soon as you do your starter map. And that's the one for the Norns, Snowden Drifts. I think it's quite fitting that we're doing this ever so slightly out of order, because this is one of the more forgettable maps in the game to me. This is a map without much very interesting going on for guild features. There is no dungeon entrance on this map. There is no world boss really on this map. The metas are rather forgettable, and so what does that mean for most players? You don't spend much time here. The most you'll do is enter the guild puzzle from this map, but now even that is in a separate instance, so yeah, I just kind of don't find myself on many adventures around the Snowden Drifts. Nonetheless, I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about as we go through. In particular, where we already are is a very cool hidden event where if you find a wounded mower in this rough region of the world and you do damage to it, you can actually trigger a hidden event where you'll be attacked by a black mower. So if you played Guild Wars 1, you should be familiar with black mowers. It's very deadly and powerful mowers that are great hunters, kind of tied to the Echovaled Forest more than anything, really. But they are around here in northern Tyrian areas 250 years later, and it's an event where you have to fight a black mower plus two of his friends. He's called the Beak of Darkness, and he's got his Darkwing Defenders with him, which was the name of a shield in the original game. And what's especially weird is in that event, the enemy, the mower itself, has eaten a food consumable. When you hover over their active effects, you can see that it's eaten food that has nourishment on it, which is very strange. I think it's the only example of that existing in the whole game. It's weird to think about, but many of the humanoid creatures around the world could totally have had that, right? Utilities and nourishments and stuff. Maybe it could have some kind of impact on the way they fight if they'd really gone very far with it. But yeah, it's the mower. I guess the idea is, I don't know, it's been hunting and it's eaten something, but it's defending its brethren. Lots of nice little things like that. And on the top left of the map as well, there's a very cool sequence where you can go into a cave and you find that you can lured by a mesmeric, like, demon. Anyway, where you just saw we portaled out of, that's actually the jumping puzzle for this map. It's called the King Jarliss Refuge. It refers to King Jarliss, who is a dwarf. The dwarves obviously not present at this point in the Guild Wars 2 story or the game. And King Jarliss being a prominent, the king, who turned himself to stone, in theory could still be around. But really you don't get much lore or anything interesting. It's just the name. I always remember being super excited by that jumping puzzle and exploring there because of its name. But it's kind of a simple one, honestly. You just jump across a couple of pipes and go into a cave. Looks really half-baked, sort of not quite finished. But hey, there's a reason to go in there a little bit at least, because there are some map completion objectives, as we've seen. This map, just like with Gendaran actually, is going to be really quick. In fact, this is the new quickest. And I guess you can do it quite efficiently. We're down here on the bottom right with the Owl's Abattoir. So this is a very special place, I think, to most Guild Wars 2 players. What you need to understand, guys, is where we're standing right now is right next to Holbrack. Now, there are no portal entrances to Holbrack anywhere near here, and there is a mountain chain separating the map from the city, but it is very, very, very close. And what do you find at Holbrack? Well, you find the great lodges to the various spirits of the wild, the prominent greater spirits of the wild that the Norn really care about, have these massive lodges. And what am I standing on right now? Well, one of those lodges, built right next to Holbrack, but it's dilapidated, it's fallen apart. And this is a really, really beautiful area. There are several places where they talk a bit about this spirit of the wild, Owl. But actually coming here, you get the most information of all. There are little notepads and journals strewn about, I think. That guy at the Hero Challenge talks about Owl. But it's basically a spirit of the wild that has been destroyed, that has been killed. It's really, really sweet. Getting to this vista is even very cool, in that it's a bit of a jumping puzzle type thing that you've got to go up or around on the side. And yeah, all this scaffolding, it looks like the place has been burnt down. I think this is the best Guild Wars 2 representation of a destroyed, like, or at least burnt seeming building that I've experienced. You see all these damage writings that you can read. I really recommend, if you guys are playing along, if you're going for your own map completion, whatever, you're not familiar with the lore, you should really take your time here. Read the damage writings, just sort of get into the somber atmosphere of a lost spirit of the wild. It's very, very, very nice. And in fact, you can see one of the events to do with it is triggered here as well. And the devs do talk more about Owl as the story goes along. But that's a nice prominent thing. And I just mostly like that it's a very Holbracky building right next to Holbrack. That sort of reminds you how close you are to the city, even though the gameplay doesn't sort of allow you to go near it. Which is one of those weird things about the Guild Wars franchise that happens a lot. You know, it happened in Guild Wars 1 too. where you could be right next to something, but the way that it's structured into separate maps, it feels very, very, very distant and very alien. Thinking, for example, about the boundaries between the Crystal Desert and Alona in the original game, which even had their own separate world maps, despite being geographically close, and when you looked across, you could see certain landmarks, like the Lonely Vigil statue or whatever. So back on the Lions Road, up north here. Easy little renown quest where we just destroy the markers, deal with various threats to the road, like these jotun. These jotun actually look tiny to me right now, which is weird. I guess it's because we're not just playing a norn, but I think we're a really big norn. So now the jotun look human-sized, which is very strange. The game has a tendency to do with that, to mess with my sense of scale. I don't know whether you guys have that as well, but especially once mounts start getting introduced and you're running around on these big mounts, all of a sudden enemies that look quite magnificent before and large suddenly feel really small. It probably happens to me a lot as someone who's played so much Asura too in my formative days. I like the Lions Road events. I like this particular place. There's kind of a sense of two routes through the map that the devs suggest here. One is along the road, which has actually been attacked by Icebrood. And then another is along like a dirt path that has been hastily constructed to divert around the Icebrood. And they kind of lead you that way. This is a very special area of the world to me because I really, really connected with that initial story about evacuating Ascalon in the first game. And that was all about a treacherous climb through the mountains to this distant region, and the perils of the mountain, and the people we lose along the way, including the prince himself. So, in Guild Wars 2, I was kind of looking for that experience again. And the game was supposed to feel bigger and better, and I really wanted to just do that travel across the Shiver Peaks. And I'm really happy to say that the Guild Wars 2 map does feel, you know, like it's designed for that kind of left-right traversal. Now, in truth, depending on what race you play at the start, you might not be going from east to west. You might be going from west to east. Or you might just skip it all with an Asura Gate, or with the teleport to friend, or a waypoint after the new player experience. One of the worst parts of the new player experience, and particularly the free-to-play initiative, was the unlocking of all the waypoints. So you never really have to travel anywhere else. You already have instant access everywhere, even without Asura Gates. But so you might not be, but for many players they are. They are making the same route through the pass, and it's fun. You know, it turns out the Guild Wars 2 feels smaller than the original. You know, when I think about this place in the first game, I think about big, long, snowy fields, loads of rocks around, and patrolling minotaurs that are just on these epic long quests in massive migratory patterns. And that's just in like one map, and there's like 4 maps to get through. In Guild Wars 2, you know, in Snowden, you can kind of run through in a matter of minutes if you like. So the sense of scale is a little bit messy, but visually, I mean, it's beautiful. We even get these awesome varieties of Icebrood. These are Icebrood Norn, which look absolutely crazy. I love their design. If you're wondering why Icebrood Norn looks so mental, it's not all of them do. Like, there's another one over in front of us right now who's an Icebrood Norn that looks normal. And the idea is, were they transformed? Were they invoking a totem at the time they became Icebrood? And that's a very subtle thing, but it is true. When you play one of the later dungeons, Frostgorge Sound, in story mode, there is a very specific moment where a Norn, a Sons of Svanir Norn, who is opening his body and embracing the Ice Dragon, he invokes his totem to bear and then gets transformed. He becomes an Icebrood right then and there. And then he becomes the big monstrous creature. But that happens super late game, and you can interact with them in rare play instances in the early game, in the open world, like those ones we just fought. You just kind of won't get the answer for a long time. And a lot of people, probably the answer goes over their head because they're just, you know, focused on DPS mechanics or whatever. They don't see what has been laid out for them. But anyway, yeah, back to the idea of evacuating Ascalon, traveling across these areas. It is pretty much preserved. I will note, though... Oh, and by the way, an early moment to interact with the Coden here. Coden, who have actually come down from the map to the north, Frostgorge Sound, and you get a little bit of talk about them there. One thing I will note is where we are currently standing is not the same mountain pass as we used in Guild Wars 1. It's actually much further south. I always tend to think of this as being near Anvil Rock and as being near like the Deldrimore, the Iron Horse mines and stuff. I always feel like we're there, but we're not that far north. The Ascalonians of 250 years ago, when they traveled across the mountains, they were much further up. Like, if you want to find Yak's Bend in Guild Wars 2, you won't find it here. You have to go all the way up into Frostgorge Sound, at which point it's actually recreated in a really beautiful way. We'll get there in the series later. But here, to really drive that home, I'll show you guys Shaman's map for the first time in this episode. And as you can see, amazingly, we're not really overlapping with very much. We're overlapping with the mission areas of the Frostgate, which is funny. That's actually where Prince Rurik dies and gets buried in an avalanche. So in theory, on this map, you could find that spot, but it kind of is a little bit too far south. It's almost in like, it's in one of the mountain ranges that they generated basically between here and Holbrook, so you can't quite get exactly there, which is a real shame. That would have been a very, very prominent badass location to go back to that grave. In particular, in Guild Wars 1, the story is that Rurik dies and gets buried in an avalanche. You leave, and then at some point later, off screen, the Lich visits his body, resurrects him, and takes him to the Fire Island chain. So when you, the player, are playing the game, you leave Rurik here, and then at the very end, you realise Rurik's back in the Fire Island chain, and it's like, what happened there? That off-screen moment of the Lich visiting the body could have been referenced in Guild Wars 2, and it would have made everything feel really cohesive, right? You could have been, you go over to where the grave was, and it says there have been this was where Rurik was buried by snow, but he'd been dug up. There are signs of necromantic residue in the area, or something like that, you know, that would acknowledge the Lich had visited this area of the world, which was something that we never got to see. Anyway, we don't get to do any of it because his body's slightly out of range. But yeah, we're far enough south that we're not at Anvil Rock at all. In fact, 8 years on, Guild Wars 2 has still never actually given us Anvil Rock or Ice Tooth Cave or any of those Guild Wars 1 Shiver Peak locations. And if you want to visit a lot of them, you got to go up to Frostgorge. We're going to overlap with the Deldrimore Bowl a little bit when we get to the very, very westerly reaches of this map, but still, it's not too much. Another big location from Guild Wars 1 that did take place here is the settlement of Beacon's Perch, which was a dwarven area. And of course, the dwarves have evacuated the mountains now. The story here being that there were once upon a time many dwarves. They turned to stone now. They're gone. They're fighting the Elder Dragon beneath the depths. And so they kind of fell into disrepair. In some of the other maps, you can really see a lot of their architecture still around, but I don't think on this one. I think Beacon's Perch is kind of completely missing and gone. There's a good amount of story on this map, and in fact, the story on this map tends to be some of the harder personal story that you can do. There's a particular personal story mission with the Dermond Priory where you're defending a Lion Guard outpost that's being attacked by Dredge and Risen and things, and it's really hard because of the Dredge APCs and stuff. There's a hero challenge on this map that's really hard because of the Dredge as well. And there's another personal story quest that can be challenging with the Vigil to the south. But if you do it right, you can kind of skip everything, so that's usually the better one to go for. So up to the north, we find one of the remote Norn homesteads. It's funny because I don't really think of these as Norn lands that much. It's strange. When I'm in Keswick Hills, I really feel like I'm in human territory. When I'm in Diessa Plateau, I really feel like I'm in Char territory. But the Norn are so remote and, like, you know, secluded and isolated that when I'm here, I don't feel like I'm amongst the Norn anymore. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I'm just out in the wilderness, and sometimes we'll find Norn here because the Norn have tamed this landscape. They know how to live here, but overall, it feels very, very, very different to many of the others. You know, even Brisbane feels more connected to the Sylvari/Asura than this feels connected to the Norn to me. I mentioned at the start of the video that this is a map that I very rarely spend any time on. I don't actually think that's a bad thing about the game. As much as I like to see, as you know, high value and high efficiency out of every part of the game, I'd like to think all of the game is well trafficked all the time. As much as I feel that way, you know, Guild Wars 2 has a lot of open world maps, you know. And so maybe it's okay that there's one that feels desolate and remote, and maybe it's kind of perfect that the one that feels desolate and remote is also this snowy place. It just feels slightly out of sync because, you know, we should be making direct comparisons between this and Keswick and so on. And those other maps I've just spent so much more time on. It is true that Keswick doesn't really have a convincing world boss either. But it had all those living world updates and so on. That really just kind of bring it into the fore, and it feels a bit more central to the world. So I don't know, maybe you guys have some ideas as to why I feel that way. If maybe you guys played a Norn when you first picked up Guild Wars 2, and you have these really deep connections with this map. Anyway, moving on, we're at a pretty cool settlement here with a lot more opportunity to interact with Coden. This is also one of the rare occasions where you can meet a Largos in Guild Wars 2, Core Guild Wars 2. So the Largos didn't exist in the first game. They are an enigmatic new race that is localized, really, or comes from the deep, deep waters far away from here. And while when we meet the Largos, they do refer to a broader society and rules they live by and so on, we really don't get to engage with it, so they are super cool for that reason. I love a good mystery. The Largos, there's so much mysterious and badass about the Largos. They're assassins that you find. There's maybe 4 of them in the whole open world, maybe 4. And one of them is in Brisbane, at one of the waters there, and one of them is also here in this very, very cold area. So you can kind of see that they'll even survive in fairly cold waters. Actually, as I record this video, one of the recent patches that came out have us interact with a Largos as well, to do with one of the mounts and being able to make it swim underwater. And it's funny to me because they could have picked the one here, but maybe it's a little bit too irregular. They picked one actually out in ore, which we'll get to way, way, way down the line. Actually, I take it back. Maybe there's 6 Largos in the open world. That's not including one that you meet in the personal story. Anyway, here is a very dangerous cave. Getting this POI is really challenging sometimes. It's very, very tight in here. There's a mining suit. I think he's a veteran mining suit, so that will just keep spawning dredge at you. And if you don't have quite the damage or the pressure to push through it, you'll get swarmed. Also, because it's close quarters and you're kind of constricted on the left and right, you are going to find yourself in a weird place where they're using these sonic shockwaves on you that are really hard to dodge and avoid, and they'll just cluster you down. A beautiful underwater tunnel here. Reminds me of another underwater tunnel kind of in Brisbane, but this one's very frosty themed. I think the devs do super well here. And there's a Lion Guard haven next to us that we're about to surface near. Now I have to say, there is a hidden area of the map at that Lion Guard haven that I only just found out about in the last year of playing the game. There's a whole interior section at this haven with a secret base filled with members of the Order of Whispers. And there's like a stairway that climbs down near the water's edge. They've got a printing press in there. There's multiple NPCs with dialogue. It actually features as a guild mission location as well. For the guild treks, where you're just meant to go to interesting areas of the world. For all these years, I'd just never been to that trek location. I'd never done it. I mean, the way that treks are implemented is that, in theory, there can be loads of them you never visit because you just kind of get into a habit and a routine of going to the same ones. So, yeah, do check that haven out, especially if you're a member of the Order of Whispers. Completely blew my mind to find another area of Guild Wars 2 that for so many years the product had managed to hide from me. And I suppose it's natural that it's here on this map. I wouldn't even be surprised if there was a second place of some substance on this map that I just never found. Because, again, I don't export them. Pretty boring hearts, though, I have to say, for this map. Generic kill stuff. There's nothing like the Jotun runestone trading or talking to Ettins to, you know, try to convince them of your cause, or making potions, or any of the more interesting, you know, dealing with maths problems. I think they're all very, very, very generic kill stuff, hearts on this one, unless I'm forgetting something. I really like how efficiently we're collecting the extra items, and like there we had it in the elixirs and stuff, though. I'm definitely not that fast while I play this, so it's really, really good to see. Here we get a lake where I've spent an enormous amount of time in the past year. The reason I've spent a lot of time at this lake is because there's an event here I need to complete for one of my legendary collections. Like the precursor collections for all the achievement points. Trying to get everything in the game, you're going to find yourself there. But the event that triggers there is really, really buggy, and it stalls a lot. I think ever since launch, it's an event that's stalled a lot. So once it stalls, I think that's it until you can spin up a new server. So if you can get a big Zerg, like if I did a stream, I could get a big Zerg over there, spin up a new server, and then I could trigger the event. But if you don't have the capability to do that, you've almost kind of got to wait for a new game patch so that all the world states reset, and then you can sneak in real quick and you can grab that. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's kind of the situation we're in. It reminds me a bit of when I was playing WoW Classic last year, and I wanted like a rare hunter pet, but the only way to guarantee when it would spawn is wait for a patch or wait for the game to go down for maintenance, and then when it comes back up, you have to count the exact hours and stand at the right place. Well, Guild Wars 2 had a little bit of that. Where we're currently standing is another trailer location, another original trailer spot. They have a moment where they track through the snowy trees, and you see, I think it's this centaur base that you see. They're actually using some weird skill animations there. They're using an early version of Lightning Storm, which has a really, really kind of big and obnoxious effect to it. The effect can still be found in-game. If you go to Ratassoum and you go to some of the labs in the periphery of the actual main city, you can find those Lightning Storm effects still in use. But this place here, yeah, they ran the camera over and they showed a little bit of combat happening in the background. To be honest, I never really liked the snowy bits of the trailer. And I don't know why. I don't know whether it's just because I'm not that into snowy areas in games. And that's definitely true, but at the same time, I remember being in a forum thread and people talking about how the trees looked flat. I remember that very clearly, the like pine trees, the evergreens with their snow on them, that they looked flat, and that's why it wasn't a good part of the trailer. It's very weird to think of the things that stick with us. Angvar's Trove. Very nice little area here. This is where you can find a pretty nasty dynamic event. You see that portal there? You can actually travel through it. Actually, I think that portal gets us out, and it only appears after the event has been done. So another player's come along here and finished that. But yeah, a cool little hidden room and a nice event with a mesmeric enemy. Is it a Flesh Reaver we're fighting? Can't remember. The Flesh Reavers are very cool. A sort of new race to the stage. They were created during one of the Eye of the North dungeons, or sort of. And now you find them in a lot of places in Guild Wars 2. Another heart. Slay Sons of Svanir, break their banners, destroy corrupted ice. I mean, what is there to say about this kind of heart? We've seen it a million times. We'll see it a million times more. I think it will get really tedious right around Dredgehorn Cliffs. We've probably got like another 3 or 4 of these to do before we're really done with all of them in the game. Hell, maybe even a couple more, because probably Frostgorge has got a couple of them, right? At least, you know, there's a certain pattern to it and a certain thing that you can remember about what to do each time. You can get used to, you know, taking out the banners or taking out the corrupted ice, whatever one you feel gives you more heart credit. Nice, very subtle bit of jumping to get onto this plateau for this vista. It looks like it should be really simple. You just walk up. But no, there is that little bit of a fallen down tree that you've actually got a platform on, all correctly with collision and stuff, before you can actually climb up. Nowadays, I guess with the Springer, you could just hop up there. In fact, not even like a charge ability on the Springer. Just a regular jump on the Springer will probably be high enough to get you up there. Or any number of other mounts. Nice little moment there as well, I guess, of starting it, killing some enemies. Then do the Vista in the middle. The enemies respawn, you return, and you finish up. The respawn rates are an interesting thing that I always wonder about. Like, if I was making an MMO, how hard it would be to find the perfect balance of enemy respawns, because you want enemies there so that people can get loot and experience and progress in these renown hearts in Guild Wars 2's case and so on. But you also kind of want it to feel like it matters when you kill things. Guild Wars 1, it always felt like it mattered if you killed something because nothing respawned. Things only respawned when you completely left the area and reset the whole instance. You know, that was one of the benefits. And moving into Guild Wars 2, ArenaNet had all of these new questions to answer because they were going to a more fully fledged MMO experience, and this was one of them. In a weird way, killing enemies for experience is not a big thing for Guild Wars 2 for a lot of people, so they could have got away with longer respawn times, which might have felt good. I wonder how much testing they're ready to go with that. And I say that fully understanding that in truth, the quickest way to level up is not map completion anymore. I mean, it's rewarding in that you get lots of maps and you get a variety of experiences, and it's the main thing that people get led into. I stand by what I've said over all of these videos. It is like the predominant experience of PvE when you start a new character and so on, map completion. It is, and it has been for years. But underneath the surface, if you get really efficient with the game, what you'll realize is triggering boosters and rampaging around killing enemies is a quicker way of leveling up. But the thing is, what you need to do is kill enemies that are always giving bonus experience. Now, at launch, where all of these ideas and all this balance and stuff was crucial, there wasn't so much bonus experience around because there were lots of players around and they were taking all of the experience before the enemies had a chance to accrue it. Don't forget, it's not just that other people stole your bonus experience, it's that the bonus experience doesn't get time to exist because enemies are getting slain fast. But now, of course, where the population shifted on, we're in kind of a different place where there is a lot around. In fact, to tell you the truth, I remember on my first ever character exploring, like going ham on the game and playing it more than people realistically should in such a short space of time. And I remember getting quite ahead of the curve and being in late game char maps before most people got there. And I remember there being heaps of bonus experience. So in a way, this was a weird game that did something MMO should really try not to do, which is it gave boosts and exponential, well, not exponential, but extra growth to the no-lifers that are trying really hard. Really, you want to do the reverse, right? You want to try and rein the no-lifers in a bit so that the more casual players feel like they're on a little bit more of an even playing field. I mean, not completely, but you know, you do want to have a little bit of balance there. And Guild Wars 2 kind of went in the opposite direction because of the bonus experience system. So another dredge mine. This one's not too bad. I actually kind of like this area, maybe because of the personal story quests that we get to do here. It doesn't really overlap in any meaningful way with any Guild Wars 1 location. But this is basically where Beacon's Perch was. And you see now we're just kind of in a big mine. You know, maybe Beacon's Perch was slightly outside, slightly down this corridor that we'll be running down here, actually. Crazy amounts of dredge in there. So that's maybe why I think that part's pretty easy. Because there's just so many dredge, and they give you so much credit for killing each one. It was called Aura Plenty. I can imagine that maybe Arena had some ideas to do more interesting stuff there. But you notice, it's just kill things. All these huts, it's just kill things, kill things, kill things, kill things. So Podaga Steading. I think this place looks beautiful. But it's also, as you can see, a place that can fall under attack to the dredge. So often when you get here, the dredge own it. And also, I think because... By the way, look at this. Look at how subtle this is. Jumping on these tree stumps to jump on these tree stumps to jump onto this. This really stumped me on my early playthroughs. Really stumped me. This is all for the vista up here. And it's a crazy cool vista. I love, you know, the variety of places that you go to get up there. But that's a real challenge. I remember looking confused how to get that vista for a long time. And loving that I was so confused. I kind of relished in the puzzle of it. Way back when. But yeah, Podaga Steading, because it's a place that can fall to the dredge, I get the feeling that the devs were much more refined about how many NPCs exist there and stuff. You look at the opposite of that, like Gendaran Fields. The Ascalon settlement is a really complicated, amazing place, and it can be attacked. But I bet that's a real headache and a real nightmare to implement. So then you get Podaga Steading, which doesn't have much going on. It looks cool, but there's not too much you can do. I think there's some hidden cool, you know, random dialogue that can trigger there for sure. That's worth to sit around. But I always wish that they did a bit more in that area. Also, did you guys notice a second ago in that cave as we went up to the hero challenge? These stairs were culled out. It was an environment object that looked invisible until we had to get really close for them to like load in. That was very, very, very weird. A little bit strange. Anyway, the challenge itself, massive visibility once again, putting through. Such a strong skill for the open world. Anyway, you can get a bit of good length stealth. It's fantastic. Thief is obviously very good at engineer also, but you have to do more setup with, you know, making sure you have alchemy, or you are at least using a lot of bombs in a smoke field or something. So, Awesome Crest Climb, of all the areas in this map, I've probably spent more time here. Why? Because this is right outside, well, nearly right outside the guild puzzle. Wow, what an incredible method for beating this heart. That is disgusting. So here we're seeing a consequence of something that this convinces me even more that ArenaNet kind of flubbed something a little bit into the game. So what we're doing here is we're talking to these NPCs, choosing the ferocious option. And then we're just, which triggers the heart. And then we're just talking to them again and doing the ferocious option again. So one big problem with the personality system as it was originally implemented is there's no permanence or consequence to what you choose. If you want to be ferocious, fine, be ferocious. But then if you think, oh, no, I actually want to be charming, 99.99% of the time in this game, you just open the dialogue panel again, and then you just pick the other option. So that just completely undermines the whole system. And it meant that at any point you could tweak what your overall personality was, and it was just, you know, it was nonsense. They needed to have some kind of memory for what you'd said and why, and I suppose that was a whole can of worms and things that they didn't have the time to get into. Here, this guy Razorwing, I think, is a reference to Guild Wars 1 as well, I think, if I remember rightly. So I guess they've made the decision to have all the dialogue repeatable. But maybe that wasn't always their plan. Maybe they had foresawn this issue. And that's why this heart is designed in such a way that they expect you not to be able to refresh. Maybe when this heart was made, the thinking was, yeah, it would remember. But then the change went through later, and eventually they kind of nuked the whole idea. Kind of interesting, right? But there you have it. That's the top left corner of the map. Really quick, really efficient. Amazing footage. Thanks to TechZoon. Thanks for watching, guys. Please do remember, if you want more discussion or to hang out with like-minded people, get involved with the community a bit more, in the description is a link to our Discord. You don't need an account or anything. You can join. It's no pressure. But the more the merrier, I say. So I thought I'd remind you guys. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.